Why South Sudan? An Every Village podcast where we answer questions about the world's youngest nation. The question of the day is, what are some recent stories of impact from the field? Hello, everyone. My name is Tianna Johnston, and I am the host of this podcast called Why South Sudan? I have Andrew Brown, Executive Director of Every Village, here with me.
I'm really looking forward to this one, Tianna.
This one's going to be a goodie. So, actually, as we dive into that, I think you probably know this about me, but I am a little bit of a testimony junkie.
I like that. Self-proclaimed.
I love just testimonies of how the Lord's moved and how the Lord is working. Like, did you ever read like missionary stories and stuff?
I did, yeah. No, I loved it. I mean, I remember growing up reading them, and then even as an adult, I love biographies for sure.
Okay, name one book off the top of your head that you're like, that was amazing.
Bonhoeffer?
Oh, you recently, yeah. You know, a movie's coming out.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. No.
Okay.
And it wasn't recently for me. I read it I don't know, probably 8 years ago, but it's a great one.
Oh, man. Okay, there's one for me. This was like my all-time first book ever that I think after I became a believer, and just I was so hooked. Chasing the Dragon.
Oh, I gave that one to you.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. Oh, that one's so good.
Yeah.
So yes, testimonies actually are super, super encouraging, and we actually have a few to share today. I was thinking, yeah, I can share some, you can share some, and then we can elaborate a little bit, maybe just kind of share a little bit about culture too. So
that'll be fun, and I reserve the right to share more than I'm allotted. So
I won't kick you off the podcast.
Okay. So
the first story that I want to share with everyone today is in reference to our water program. And it says, the water maintenance program has greatly impacted the community. Before, women were walking 3 to 4 hours for water, and there would often be fighting over water at the neighboring wells. That has all stopped with the wells being maintained. This is a huge story because I know we've both talked about, women having to walk so far to get wells. But I think oftentimes you don't think of, when you see those pictures of women gathering around the wells, you also don't see the emotion side of it. Imagine just being so frustrated. You're tired, you're hot, you have to get water for your family, for your children. You might even be bringing your children along because they can't be left at home. So there's so much emotions connected to it too. And so just imagining the relief of being able to have water closer to your house, and that everybody's in probably more positive spirits than having to walk so far to get water.
For sure. I'm sure I know you visited lots of water wells. What's the longest line of jerry cans you've seen?
Oh my gosh.
Because, the ladies will come, and they'll oftentimes, because it's hot out there, so they'll come and they'll put their jerry can in line by the well, and then they'll go sit in the shade or whatever, because it can take a long time, right? But
yeah,
you've probably seen some pretty long lines.
I mean, I've never counted, but I would literally say probably like 30, 40 plus. And a lot of, and even the kids that are there, like the young teenage girls, like they're trained to, when this one is done, then they automatically pump the next one. But if they have to go home, I mean, they have to, put the jerry can on their head and just walk home. So
yeah, I mean, it really is. I've seen the same thing. And, you think about it, these are 20-liter jerry cans, and, I know for you listening, you can't picture what I'm doing right now, but I've got my hands kind of horizontally and I'm pumping this water well. It's not an easy process, right? I mean, it takes a lot of mechanical motion to get the water flowing and to keep the water flowing. And so, I don't know how many minutes it takes per jerry can, but, a good number of minutes per jerry can. And if you're talking about 30, 40 jerry cans lined up, no wonder why women will just get frustrated. They'll get tired out, and they'll start bickering or fighting about something or other. Or
people trying to cut line.
Yep.
That has to be frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, I've even heard stories. I remember we drilled a well in, I don't remember what year it was, but in the Tanj area, and we were visiting with the community to hear their testimonies, and they were telling us that the ladies would have to go first thing in the morning to beat the monkeys to the water wells.
Oh yeah.
And so this was before they drilled a new well. That it was hand pump, but they had an open hand dug well, and so the ladies were going there, but the monkeys would go down and obviously cause a lot of problems. Monkeys
Yeah,
aren't exactly tame, and so the ladies were having to go early morning every day. I mean, there's just so many issues that we don't even think about, right?
for sure. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. No, I just, it's so important for us to hear how water saves time, and then it also provides peace in the community relationally between women. I've got a testimony here. We collect testimonies for all of our program areas, every month, and we get lots of them, and they're just amazing to read. But here's another testimony in water. It says, the Water Management Committee chair of a new community called Adiama said he thanks God for the SWC service agreement. That's the Sustainable Water Cooperative, our well maintenance program. He thanks God for the SWC service agreement, saying that his community has been spending a lot of money every year on repairs, but the well keeps breaking because there are no new spare parts in the market. But now with SWC, the well is repaired with new spare parts and with less money than we've been spending all this time. And when I read this, I just really like this because it talks kind of about the business side of this, and this is why the water well system in South Sudan is so broken. There aren't access to spare parts, and I've talked about that before. And so what I've seen happen many times, if a community does have strong leadership where their well breaks and they rally together and they go house to house and they collect money to get the well repaired, that's a good community that has a vision and a desire to maintain their wells. What they'll do is they'll collect the money, and then they'll send somebody typically to the government, wherever that government is located, the nearest government office, and pay the money. And the government typically has a pump mechanic that's employed by the government, but these pump mechanics aren't paid. They're just paid by the job, but oftentimes they don't get a lot of jobs. So it's not a regular steady thing. They're not necessarily at the office during the day, but anyway, they'll pay the government to come repair the well. These pump mechanics come out, and they might have a toolbox, but they don't have any parts at all. So what they do is they take these pipes out of the ground, and typically one of the most common areas of failure is the pipes start leaking because of the soil corrodes the galvanized iron. And so I've seen it before several times where these pump mechanics basically take the old pipe. It's really, crusted and not in great shape, and they'll just cut off the leaky section, and then they've got a tap and die set, and they'll thread the pipe and then put it back in the ground. It's a little bit shorter than it was before, but I've seen it where I was kind of sad the first time I saw it because I was just like, man, that pipe going back in the ground, it's going to break again in 2 months. But I was standing next to our operations director, Brad Belis, and he gave me a perspective that permanently shifted my thinking on this. He said, Andrew, the issue is not that the well breaks. The issue is that it takes a long time to get it repaired. And I realized there is, even if they're working with the parts they have, even if they, the well breaks again in 2 months, if there's somebody that's available with the knowledge and the tools to repair it quickly, then it keeps the water flowing. Now, eventually, you need to bring in new spare parts, of course. And so that's what the SWC program does, is it matches up training pump mechanics, assigning the communities, and then bringing the spare parts. And it's just a really cool thing. And so, but I love that this guy testified that not only is it helping the water flow, but it's also at a cheaper price than what they've been paying before, too. So it brings the cost down for communities to be able to really access clean water, which is amazing.
These stories are so good because it shows how much it impacts. It impacts so many things, not just the women, not just the pump mechanics, not just the government. Like, it's literally impacting so many people. Yeah. All right, let's jump over to radio. So I have a story here. It says, one night a thief brought a cow with its calf and left them at the radio gate tied up. His intention was to let the radio team announce to the owner the return of the cows. And indeed, the lady, who is the owner, found her cows, and thank God that he changed the thief's heart to return the cows, and God changed his heart through radio. So I know this story sounds maybe a little bizarre to us here in America, but I mean, imagine your most valuable possession. And let's say somebody breaks into your house, Andrew, and let's say they take your wife's wedding ring. Assuming that's might be your most valuable possession, but they take
I'm not going to tell you.
They take your wife's wedding ring, and the Lord convicts them, and so they then bring it to the church to then give it to them to show repentance. And it is such a huge thing because cows are their most valuable possession. And so one, I mean, this is a pure miracle that somebody would, I mean, talk about a change of heart, talk about a miracle that the Lord has done. By this thief, the Lord really changing their heart, but also for the woman that she got her cows back. So, yeah.
I love that. And also just like the simplicity of what the radio functions as in this community.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've talked about how it brings radio programs, and we think about that typically the way we listen to radio,
Mm-hmm.
but people use radio in South Sudan also kind of like a communication tool.
Mm-hmm.
So people every day will come to the radio station, and we allow them to pay a small amount of money to make an announcement on the radio. And again, it's like a lost cow, or it's a funeral of a family member, or a wedding or whatever, and they'll use the radio to make announcements because they don't have cell phones
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have ways to communicate to each other. In fact, they're such a social people. I love it. The South Sudanese, sometimes they'll literally pay money just to greet a family member at a faraway village. That's not uncommon at all. They just want to send a greeting because they're social, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's so good.
yeah. But anyway, that's great. And here's another story from radio that is just really goes to the heart change, and how we talked about in our last episode about God breaking in at just the right time to save a life. And that's this story. It's a little bit longer, and it's testimony firsthand by a man named John. And he said, "I became a believer in a surprising way. I'm married and I have 2 children, but I got wrong advice from a friend that said garden work requires local alcohol. So every morning I used to take alcohol before I went to the garden. Some months later, I became addicted to alcohol and failed to take care of my family. My wife decided to leave me, so I told her to leave, and she left. From there, life became so hard, and I could stay for 3 days without food. Then one day, I decided to kill myself. But in the morning, when I was walking to the bush to hang myself, I found another woman sitting, listening to preaching over the radio, Ako FM, which is our Mavolo station. The preaching said, 'Happy are those who mourn, for God will comfort them.' The preaching also said that God sent Jesus as a sacrifice for wrongdoers, and that we should not think our sin is so big that God will refuse us. We can come to Jesus, and he will let you free from the hand of Satan. So the preaching made me cry, and I repented that same day. Now I'm a new believer, and my wife is back home, so nothing can take me away from God." And man, I don't really need to add much to that story. I mean, that's literally God saving a physical life and obviously an eternal life as well. Just incredible.
I love it. I literally get the chills like hearing that story, because I mean, many people struggle with mental illness and even just the thought of suicide. But for this person just to walk by someone, I mean, it's just totally the Lord's provision, the Lord's just kindness that he would hear. And I love that he even remembers what he heard. It wasn't just, Jesus saves. Like, it truly was something that spoke so deeply to his heart, and that he immediately turned to the Lord, and that now him and his wife, can praise the Lord together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it changed as an entire generation for sure. Yeah.
So good. So there's one more story that I would love to share. And this is a really miraculous story. Another one, one of the many. So this one is told by a woman named Mary Nyaunut. She shares that the next day after watching the Jesus film, she had been healed of her constant back pain. She had been dealing with this back pain for 18 years straight after her 3rd miscarriage. While she was watching the film, she kept praying, "Jesus, heal me. Jesus, heal me." And she was healed. She slept well the night without pain for the first time in 18 years. I mean, talk about...
I've heard that story before. It's somewhere in the Gospels, right?
It is, yes. Seriously. I mean, talk about even just to hear her words like, "Jesus, heal me, Jesus, heal me." I mean, that is a cry of her heart. I mean, to imagine being in chronic pain for 18 years and to know, I mean, even living in South Sudan, people going to witch doctors, they weren't going out of just worshiping Satan. They were going because they're in so much pain, they will do anything. So I just imagine, even being in Bible times when Jesus walked the earth, like all of a sudden you heard of this man that was healing people, that were taking away demons and pain and suffering. Of course you're going to go. You're going to do anything to get out of the pain. And that's what this woman did, that she even went to the Jesus film, but she went to the true healer. Like that's
Yeah, I mean,
incredible.
it is like the woman who, was bleeding for 12 years, and it says she'd spent all she had on doctors and hadn't gotten
Mm-hmm.
better, but she hadn't given up faith. She hadn't lost hope. And so when she hears about Jesus, she goes to him in this crowd, and she doesn't even talk to him. Remember, she's like, if I just touch the edge of his
Mm-hmm.
garment, I'm going to be healed. And it was that faith that Jesus, like, man, the power came out for me. What happened, and who touched me? And I see that same picture, this woman, Mary
Mm-hmm.
Nyanut, sitting there watching the film. Nobody else around her knows, or she's praying probably. She's probably praying in her heart,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, heal me, Jesus, heal me. And it's like this woman reaching out and just touching the cloak of the man she's watching on screen. And Jesus is still there. The power's still going out from him. And he's still full of compassion. He sees the suffering of his children. And man, I mean, back pain is debilitating. I mean, right now,
Mm-hmm.
as we record this podcast, Tianna, you see me hobbling around. I've dealt with back pain a lot in my life, and it's debilitating. And to
Mm-hmm.
not lose hope, but to see that Jesus, he cares and he heals, it's pretty amazing. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Our last story for the day is another one on our discipleship program, and it relates to our pastor conferences that we host every year at our radio stations. And this year, I have the privilege, this is a firsthand account because I was there and I saw it. It was pretty amazing. We had a 2-day pastor conference focused on marriage and family. And I'll read the testimony, and it says, on the second day of our pastor conference in Tanj, the wife of a bishop shared how grateful she was to be there. Her husband had attended the first day and been so impacted by the topic on biblical marriage that he went home and asked her to join him the next day so they could learn together. This sounds like kind of a simple story, but man, in South Sudan, it is not. And
Mm-hmm.
Tianna, men and women, husbands, wives, they don't hang out together publicly at all.
Mm-hmm.
They
They
don't.
don't even greet each other.
Yeah, exactly. And so the concept of a bishop, first off, being impacted by this topic on marriage, and I was one of the ones speaking on it, and we had other presenters that were speaking on it. I was there. I know what we talked about, and it was gospel centric. I mean, it was hey, here's God's design for marriage, not cultural at all, and yet it was biblical.
Mm-hmm.
And God touched that man's heart. And the next day, I saw it was a big crowd, but the next day, I saw that this woman sitting on the front row that wasn't there the first day, and she was sitting next to him. But again, husbands and wives don't really interact, so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see them talking to each other or certainly touching the whole day. And then at the end, we give them opportunity to come up and share testimonies. And this woman got up and shared this testimony, and all of us, we didn't know who she was, and we were just really touched by her testimony.
Mm-hmm.
She was so excited that her husband had gone home and he was excited, and he said, I want you to come with me so we can learn together as a Christian couple. That's the type of nation-changing stuff we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's huge, big stories that we can talk about, but at the end of the day, how South Sudan is going to be changed is in the home,
Mm-hmm.
and it's between husbands and wives and in marriage and family. And so, man, that really just gave me a lot of peace and a lot of hope as well for
Mm-hmm.
the opportunities we have to make a big impact in the church and in the nation. So anyway, I love this, Tianna. We should honestly, we should do this every so often, not just do it one time, but maybe we should semi-regularly do stories from the field. I don't know.
I think we should. It definitely gets me fired up and really excited for what the Lord's doing. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, me too. I'm just excited. But definitely just really want to praise the Lord.
Testimony junkie.
Coming live. Thank you so much again. So, I invite everyone out to come to the next episode as we will answer the question, what does a trip to South Sudan look like? Take care.